Throughout my life, I have always been fascinated by the life of a pirate. Something about the thought of a scurvy-ridden Dami-Mami throwing me off a ship for stealing too much booty has always given me a rile I just can't shake away. But now it's 2025, and it's kinda hard to get scurvy when all my friends keep force-feeding me fruits down my throat. So instead, I sought to become a space pirate. Space pirates are pretty much just pirates, but better and more efficient. Instead of spending months sailing to take somebody's booty, I can commit intergalactic war crimes in a matter of days and steal all the booty I want. So that's exactly what I'll be doing in this Rimworld playthrough. But there's just one catch. You see, I'm kind of a bit of a kleptomaniac. As a child, I used to steal candy from adults by convincing them to let me get in their van. But since then, my larceny needs have grown exponentially. So imagine my surprise when I was looking for loot on a nearby asteroid and I ran into an unattended spacecraft with the keys still in the engine. So without hesitation, I looted everything on that asteroid before me and my crew ran away with the biggest booty I've ever seen. But it turns out, stealing random unattended spaceships does have its own consequences. And apparently the people I stole the spaceship from were very angry. They projected a message to me and gave me two options. I could either A, have my email used to be signed up for multiple femboy dating accounts, and then they'd leave me alone after, or B, be chased down by constant swarms of infinite mechanoid armies until I'm forced to run every single time they find my spaceship, using their My Spaceship app to track my ship down. The choice was extremely easy. Without hesitation, I chose option B. So with an army of angry mechonoids already on my ass, I needed to choose a place to land, and quickly. So I landed in a forest near some fertile land and some compacted steel. For now, we had about 2 weeks before the mech hive would attack us, but over time, these attacks would shorten from weeks to days very quickly. But until then, we needed to focus on the basic needs of our crew. Right now, we had 3 main space pirates all equipped with vac suits to protect them from the vacuum of space. The first is our big back named Nate. He's got a fat body because, well, he's a drug addict who binges on smoke joints all day and then eats our food at night. Then there was Coyote. She hated the idea of being addicted to drugs, but she was just addicted to food instead, and had a horrible habit of taking the last slice of pizzas at parties. Then lastly, there was Smarty, the foundational member of our crew. Smarty was always depressed. He's so smart that he could predict his own death. He said that in a matter of years, he'd be eaten by man-eating squirrels who would consume his brain in order to take over the world. Although Smarty is insane, he is an absolutely pivotal member of our team, since he's got great base stats, and he's the only person on the team who knows how to pilot our grav ship. So with my completely dysfunctional members on my team, I decided to make our stolen spaceship into something that looks a little bit more homey. So I crammed 4 beds into a room and made that their sleeping area, and then created a kitchen and a butcher table where I'd be able to supply the never-ending hunger of my 2 teammates with eating disorders. But within the first 5 minutes of my playthrough, a psychic drone stood nearby that, well, made women mad. And if that wasn't enough, both Nate and Coyote contracted malaria. This left Smarty to do quite literally everything while they were recovering. I had him dig in the mines, plant new crops, clean our base, and even tend to Coyote and Nate since he was the only one who knew anything about medicine. When they were healed, I reward Smarty by making him work even more, but this time as a cook. As we finally started to have all of our troops functional and contributing to our base, I had Nate work on creating a wood fire generator that would be used to power the freezer where we'd keep Chef Smarty's meals frozen. But in our brief moments of respite, we got raided by our first attacker, Leo Greywolf. He was awesome at mining, great at cooking, fantastic at planting, and he even loved being underground. This was the ideal pawn to send to the mines, and he'd have a blast never seeing the light of day again. But first, I needed to see if he could pass our initiation phase. So I had all my pawns surround him and beat the ever-living crap out of him until he joined our party. But he must have been from the UK or something, because he stabbed my troops, causing a great amount of blood loss before he went down. And apparently Leo was not used to being curb stomped by 3 pirates, because in the process of initiating him, well, we accidentally killed him. Next time, we should probably wear Skechers instead of Timberlands when trying to curb stomp our foes into submission. While in the midst of beating Leo, we were offered a quest for an ancient stockpile that was nearby. If we were going to really expand the size of our space pirate colony, quests like these would be absolutely essential for increasing the max amount of tiles that our spaceship could be. After curb stomping Leo, things were peaceful for a minute, and as I gathered more food and supplies, I almost forgot that just days ago, I'd hit the most dubious liquor slick of all time. But soon, I was reminded of my theft when I got an alert that mechonoids would soon be raiding my base. So I had Smarty gather the colony and prepare for takeoff. For some reason, Nate was extremely attached to some random hog that he thought was essential to bring on our flight, and I allowed him to bring it since, at the very minimum, his pet would make for a good dinner. Soon, Smarty rushed towards the pilot center and launched off with the ship as we headed towards our next destination. My goal was to reach the ancient stockpile that I mentioned earlier, but sadly, my ship didn't have enough chem fuel or thruster power to reach it in one jump. So we landed in a nearby fort called Fort Marullo, which was guaranteed to contain much booty ready for the taking. As we landed our ship, we experienced a crash landing due to Smarty overheating the ship by leaving in such a rush. In the future, we'll need to level up his intelligence to avoid ship accidents like this again. In the meantime though, Smarty and Nate repaired the thrusters, and once this was done, it was time to raid the ancient fort that could contain many valuable resources or extremely dangerous foes. As a kid, Smarty used to hack into other people's Roblox accounts and steal all their Robux, so it was no surprise that he knew how to hack a door to an ancient military fort that was thousands of years old. But soon, as Smarty entered, he was bombarded by turret fire that nearly took his head off. Thankfully, Smarty was able to dodge most of these bullets by dropping down like Neo in the Matrix. And as he was our most valuable member, I sent him back outside. A mission like this would need someone brave, someone courageous, and most importantly, someone more expendable, who just so happens to get high and eat all our snacks. So we sent in Nate. Now, Nate was a much bigger guy, which kind of made him a much bigger target. So it was no surprise when the turrets got 2 headshots on him, cracking his jaw and cutting off part of his ear. And as soon as I beelined it to the room, my heart dropped when I saw there was no loot in sight. So I sent out Smarty and Coyote to breach the walls and sent them all back to the ship to get some much deserved rest. But Nate happened to be extremely mad at Smarty for making him put his life on the line and pretty much getting shot in the jaw for no reason. So he spent about 4 hours insulting Smarty as much as he could. And when Smarty began to run away from the pain of being bullied, Nate chased him down around the lake for another 2 hours. Finally, Smarty broke when Nate insulted his intelligence. So much to the point where he nearly tried killing himself by running straight into the same turrets that almost killed Nate earlier. So like any good friend would do when their friend's feeling down, Nate apologized to Smarty by handcuffing him to a radiator and leaving him in a small closet until he promised to never be sad again. After some emotional healing and physical healing after Nate dislodged the turret bullets from his skull, Smarty promised that he would never be sad again. So Nate let him free. But this was only so that Smarty could start mollywopping Nate as soon as he went to sleep. So in a rage of anger, Nate shot off Smarty's left toe and then began to beat the crap out of him until he began to calm down again. Smarty definitely came out of the losing end of this battle, but it seemed like the beef between Smarty and Nate were finally coming to an end. Smarty was still in a severe recovery state, but he was the only person who could hack terminals inside the base. Now, any sane person would understand by now that these forts need to be taken very seriously, as the lives of your pawns could end in just a second. But I have a ×2 burning passion in autism. So I sent Smarty to explore the next room. And imagine my surprise when 3 mechanoid wasps stood there glaring at Smarty. They beat Smarty within an inch of his life while injecting several horse tranquilizers in him that nearly paralyzed him from the waist down. I prayed that Smarty's genitalia were okay, because right now I cannot afford any robo-penises. I had Nate carry Smarty back to safety, but Coyote needed to see more. This suffering just wasn't enough. So she went into the next room, and there stood a hunter drone. If you aren't familiar with these bad boys, they are traps that will wait for any unsuspecting visitors like myself to open a door. And as soon as you do, they will follow you to the edge of the earth and explode on you like some great bukkake simulator. So of course, I ran like hell as fast as I could back to my ship. Nate got scared and immediately dropped Smarty off so he could make it back to the ship without exploding. And as Coyote ran, she knew she could make it towards the ship, but the drone would then turn its attention towards the crawling, dying Smarty. And Smarty was not going to make it to the ship in time. She knew without Smarty, no one could pilot the ship, and the mechanoids would end up dooming us the next time they track us down. So she recited the pirate's code one more time before putting her life on the line. One must do the duty in order to obtain the booty. Then she went headfirst into the hunter drone. Thankfully, the space armor Coyote had protected her against the blast, but her right shoulder and torso nearly got blown to bits in the process. Nate finished carrying Smarty back to the ship. He then began healing both Coyote and Smarty back to good health. Smarty and Coyote were both out for a couple of days, so I sent in Nate to loot the already explored regions of the fort. We got some EMP shells and some incendiary shells, but definitely nothing worth the near death of our entire colony. As our troops were recovering from the near-death experience, another raider decided to attack us, a tribal man named Nako, who was a slow drug addict who had a passion for shooting and melee. Now, if you guys remember our last raid, beating our enemies into submission with our fists just didn't seem to work. So this time, I politely shot him in the face and then proceeded to play a friendly game of punchies, where every time we saw him, we'd punch the shit out of him. This seemed to work a lot better than our last strategy, and somehow we beat Nako just within an inch of his life instead of killing him. We then locked Nako in the same shoebox that Smarty was once imprisoned in, and then we tried to convince him to join our team with our very competitive benefits, like being used as bait, or being insulted and then shot by your friends. But as we did, a trade caravan began to make its way towards our base, but it seemed like the caravan had no knowledge of the dangers of the ancient fort that I was raiding, and they pathed their way directly through the base. Now this is what I like to call a business opportunity. They took out all the threats in the area using their giant buffalo beast and warriors that preferred to kill turrets by beating them until they exploded in their faces. As soon as the raid cleared up, I sent in my troops to explore the rest of the base, and we ran into an armory that contained tons of extremely powerful guns that our soldiers could use in the future. We made sure not just to loot the base, but the dead men too. Shortly after, a wild man wandered into our base named Eagle. He was great at construction, decent at cooking, tough, and had a fantastic memory. So I had Nate convince him to join our party by introducing him to the snack drawer from our base. Once this was done, we used Eagle and Nate to expand the size of our spaceship. We even added a research bench, which would be absolutely pivotal towards having a constant supply of power at our base, and then a tailoring bench to clothe the two currently naked men at our base. After Nako was promised to never be abandoned or used as bait, he agreed to join our team. And as soon as he did, we received yet another threat that the mechanoids would be invading us soon. So it was time to wrap things up in this area. Something that I had been avoiding for a long time in this area was 2 crypto sleep containers. You see, opening up a crypto sleep container is kind of like going on a date with the one hot girl who just also happens to be batshit crazy. It could either be the best night of your life, or you could end up losing a couple organs. So I wanted to make sure that I was over prepared for a scenario like this, in case things went south. Once all my troops were armed in their positions, I opened up the crypto sleep containers, and 2 soldiers with flak vests popped out and immediately started going apeshit on me like I was trying to steal some crack from a crackhead. And apparently, that's exactly what they thought I was trying to do, because after we accidentally killed one of them and downed the other, I found actual crack on one of the soldiers. My drug addict Nate was about to have a hell of a night. In the meantime, we captured one of the pawns and rushed him back to my base. There, we began converting him to our team. While all of this was happening, Nate decided to go on a panic spree since he was bleeding out on the floor. I'm not sure why Smarty didn't attend to him first before the pawn, but I'd like to think he was getting back at Nate for shooting him in the face and calling him an imp. While Smarty began tending to the members of our team who were bleeding out, Eagle began using his burning passion for construction to expand the size of our base. This would be useful for more production of chem fuel since we were running pretty low and we also needed more storage from our troops. At one point, Nako started getting extremely angry that I gave crack cocaine to Nate instead of him, and he was on the verge of a mental break. I then started to realize what a horrible idea it was to have 2 drug addicts on the team with no drugs. So I carried Nako to the crypto sleep container and told him that if he jumped inside, there was some free drugs there. Nako was more than happy to find that out for himself, but the only drug he'd be doing is melatonin for about 200 more years. After convincing Time that surely we would never do anything similar to her, she reluctantly joined our team. Now, I'm not really sure what inspired her to join, but let's just say with a gun to your head, anyone can be properly motivated. Once Time joined our team, it was time to get out of this cursed area where half our soldiers almost died. With the mechanoid threat moving in, we quickly gathered more chem fuel to refuel our tanks, and enough food to last us a few days where we were going. As we began to prepare for takeoff, we intercepted a request to guard a survey station in exchange for a fuel optimizer, which would increase our spaceship's fuel efficiency by 30%. As we have absolutely been burning through fuel, this was a pivotal quest, so we redirected our ship to head straight towards the distress signal. We landed right next to the signal, and throughout the base lay a huge vast area of fertile land, so we decided to grow some rice and, most importantly, some drugs. As I began growing my crops, I knew that enemies would soon begin raiding this this area, so I began blocking off all the walls and creating a choke point for my enemies to funnel through the beach. The idea that I had was based off the storming of the beaches of Normandy, otherwise known as Doomsday. Essentially, soldiers would land from the north or to the east of my base, and in order to get to my base, they'd have to trudge through water and sand, which makes them extremely slow. While they did, I'd begin gunning them down while taking safety behind my barricades that I built. After beginning our construction, a strange old man came to our colony named Gungfer. He seemed extremely shady, but also kind of like he had no idea where he was. With him, he brought several other traders who were well armed. When I went to talk to him about trading, he just kept mumbling under his breath, "Pizza, pizza, boomerang, pizza, pizza, pizza." As the crippling liar that I am, I told him that we had some spare boomrat pizza in the fridge if he wanted some. And then I saw an absolute sparkle in his eyes, like he had just remembered his purpose in life again. He said, you have boomrat pizza? Please, give me some." I laughed at him and told him that what crazy idiot would make boomrat pizza? That's absolutely ridiculous. He just glared at me and began walking away as if I just said something so rude to him that it had offended his very nature. I didn't think much of it and went back to building my base. At this point, we had 5 people on our team, and we were expanding our ship pretty rapidly, but I needed a new storage room to store all my acquired booty. In the midst of creating the ultimate spaceship, it seemed that some of our pirates were looking to settle down because soon Nate and Time had began to fall in love. Nate rizzed up Time by making fun of every woman she'd ever been with, and Time was immediately sodden. Now, I don't know what type of odd ancient riz technique that Nate used to seduce Time, but I'll definitely be using that on my next date. "Hey girl, you got any exes?" Yeah, like 3 or 4. Why?" "Well, they all suck. Oh my god, please have sex with me." I think Coyote began to become a little affected by the tension between Time and Nate, because soon she built a sculpture that depicted hundreds of people thrusting in circles. So I built Nate and Time a separate room so they wouldn't have to make others uncomfortable with their weird anime roleplay they did at night. As things were beginning to look up for Nate, his sister Dee decided to raid our base. Now Nate was already pretty upset that we accidentally left his friend Nako in a crypto sleep container. So in order to make sure that Nate doesn't have a mental breakdown, we needed to avoid caution when killing his sister. I thought about taking her on my team, but she was a pyromaniac nudist with a drug addiction. So, yeah, sorry Nate. Although things didn't end so well for Nate's sister, there was some misogynist man who lay on the floor bleeding out who we just so happened to not kill. So I took this opportunity to make up for my sins by giving him the best treatment possible. I healed him, cleaned him up, put him in a nice chamber, and began to harvest his organs. Although Smarty is one of the best doctors in the ship, being in crypto sleep for over 100 years made him forget a few things. Because as he planned to harvest several organs from this prisoner, he confused the liver with the kidney, and he forgot that you only have 1 liver, not 2, and accidentally killed the man before he could harvest the rest of his organs. But on the bright side, we got the liver. Clearly the man wasn't a real misogynist, because if he was, he would have been fine with no liver. As we got ready to prepare for the next attack of humans on our base, I was surprised to find out that the next raid happened to be a bunch of disease-ridden raccoons. Coyote got hit by one of the raccoons, and I really didn't think much of it, but herself and Nate were soon infected by something I can only describe as the bubonic plague. Because once this disease reached 100%, it would straight up kill both Coyote and Nate, and it was rising fast. So I had Smarty tend to them with the best medicine possible to keep them alive. Coyote looked like she'd make it as long as we continued to tend to her, but Nate was cutting it close, and I wasn't sure if he was gonna pull through. As 3 of my pawns were all busy because of plague-related issues, our storyteller, Randy, thought it was the perfect time to send another raid to our base. They sent 4 decently armed soldiers to attack. Smarty needed to be on medic duty, but there was no way I was going to win a 4v2 raid. So I had him stop tending to Coyote and Nate's bubonic plague for a second to defend against the attack. Thankfully, our Omaha Beach setup was ready to mow down any unlucky soldiers who could make it onto our sands. I did want to capture some of these soldiers, but our pawn Time got way too much in the Doomsday roleplay and started using her LMG to instantly kill pawns the second they were within our sights. And as soon as she did, The other soldiers didn't even bother turning the corner. They began fleeing after we infected them with the worst PTSD known to man. As they fled, I sent Smarty back in to fend off Nate and Coyote's bubonic plague. And after some time, it seemed like Coyote was going to be in the clear, but Nate was neck and neck with the race between life and certain death. He was slowly recovering, but his plague was almost at 100%, and it was spreading across his body rapidly. He cried and ached with pain, and told me if he doesn't make it, tell his girlfriend Time that he loves her. If it wasn't enough that we were about to lose 2 members of our team, a fire broke out near our crops, and yet another raid was sent to our base. But this wasn't just any raid. The man sent in this raid had a ravenous intent to kill in his eyes. When I looked closer at him, it was a 90-year-old trader who had visited our base earlier, Gungfer, but I wasn't sure why he would possibly be attacking my base. However, I didn't have time for diplomatics right now. Nate was on the verge of death, Coyote was still healing, and this time I couldn't let Smarty leave his sight without tending to him. So I sent my only 2 troops to commence a 2v2 battle with the raiders. As I was busy putting out the fires that had randomly started, they managed to get past our defenses before I could get into place. Callie rushed past our barricades, but before she could even get a shot off, we put her down. I was wondering what took Gungfer so long to get there after Callie, but I forgot Gungfer was a 90-year-old man, so it took him quite a minute to actually get to us. Although Gungfer was an old man, he was an absolute sharpshooter who knew his way around some firefights. He stood behind a rock cover just enough to the point where Eagle couldn't see him, and it then became a 1v1 battle between him and Time. While all this was going on, Nate was 8% away from death by the plague, and I didn't have time to waste, so I had Eagle bum rush Gungfer as soon as he could. He took a bullet for Time, and while he ducked down, Time used her LNG to shoot the old man down to the ground.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
Thankfully, we managed to not kill any of the raiders in the process, and as we carried Callie and Gungfer back to the interrogation room, we saw that Nate had finally made it back on his feet. Just seconds before death, Smarty was able to stop the spread of the infection for both Coyote and Nate. Although Nate was still in an excruciating amount of pain, he was no longer at risk of death and had gained an immunity to the plague. Now that all my troops are safe, it was time to interrogate Gungfer. He traded with me earlier, so I didn't have any clue why he would attack me. But when I asked, he said that he had no clue who I was and had never even seen me before. I threatened him and told him that I'd feed him boom rat pizza till he exploded if he didn't fess up on why he attacked me. All of a sudden, at the mention of boom rat pizza, it's like he was some sleeper agent that came to life again, and his memory was now rejogged. Gungfer told me the story of his life. He expressed his everlasting love for boom rat pizza to me, explaining the joy he got from every explosive bite. Apparently, he loved boom rat pizza so much that he sold himself into slavery as a male prostitute to the Zegler colony. In a fluke event, he managed to join other escaping slaves as they hijacked the ship. After fighting with the captain of the slave crew over the last slice of boom rat pizza, Gungfer was sent off the ship in an escape pod. Since then, he's never remembered the taste of boom rat pizza, and all he's ever wanted is to taste it one more time. He said when I joked about having boom rat pizza earlier, he wanted to come back and ask if I had any to share, but there was just one issue. Gungfer had stage 4 dementia, so instead of remembering to ask for a slice of pizza, he thought that he was a slice of boom rat pizza and that he had to fight for his life before I ate him. So he convinced him and his crazy friend Callie to come raid us. Now at this point, you'd probably expect me to harvest old man Gungfer's organs and recruit his far more skilled partner, Callie. But believe it or not, there is an extreme benefit of having a dimension-ridden, psychotic, gunslinging, boom rat-eating elderly prostitute on our team. The number one reason being Gungfer is extremely expendable, because as a 90-year-old man, he is literally always on the verge of death. So I wouldn't really have to worry about if he ended up dying in battle, or taking up a blast of one of those pesky hunter drones that almost killed Smarty. So I began recruiting both Gungfer the Gigolo and his friend Callie on our team. Now that our quest to defend the survey scanner is complete, we were rewarded with a fuel optimizer. As I mentioned earlier, this would increase our fuel efficiency by a whopping 30%, and now we could easily reach our destinations without spending hundreds of hours farming chem fuel resources. But our base was running out of grav ship panels, and soon we would no longer be able to expand our ship anymore without obtaining a grav ship engine. But in order to do so, we'd have to raid a fort even more dangerous than the one we almost lost Smarty at. And at the moment, I'm quite unprepared for a situation like this. But I do have a solution. I like to call it Operation Elderly. After acquiring Gungfer on my team, I realized just how powerful it is to have an elderly man at your disposal. You see, the elderly are constantly talking about their death. It's all they really think about. But I had something that retirement homes couldn't offer to their inhabitants. I proposed that instead of waiting till the elderly die of disease, we send them out to the battlefields so they can be granted access to Valhalla. And that's exactly what we'd be doing in order to take over this ancient grav ship engine. Soon, another elderly man joined my party. His name was Hugh. He was an 80-year-old man who suffered from hearing loss and had 2 cataracts in his eye, also known as the perfect man to absorb several landmines from my soldiers. Before we decided to commence the raid for the grav ship engine, we settled in a nearby temperate forest to farm up some resources. However, I did forget the one downside of having barely sentient elderly on your team. If you want to keep them alive, they are a huge maintenance. Before we could even begin our raid, Hugh suffered from a heart attack that nearly killed him and used up all of our medicine in our base in order to save him in the process. And Gungfer entered several dementia-ridden states where he thought he was a muffalo grazing the fields. I realized that if we wanted to allow these old people to die their glorious deaths, we'd have to do it fast, before they died from natural causes. So I geared up the grandparents and sent my colony in to raid the ancient site containing the extremely dangerous mechanoids and an extremely valuable prize. As I sent them in, I noticed my soldiers began to become affected with toxic fallout. But have no fear, Gungfer the Gigolo has dementia, and simply forgot that he would have issues breathing air that gives you space aids. As we commenced our raid, my strategy was pretty simple. I understood now that opening a door could either lead to the most valuable loot possible, or have killer robots in it waiting for you to meet your demise. So in order to have a 99% survival rate for my colony, I'd use Gungfer and the old men to open the door. And while Gungfer absorbed the attacks, my colonists would shoot at any threats. When I opened the first dangerous door, a hunter drone stood there, ready to annihilate me. If you remember earlier, this is the same drone that almost completely killed Coyote and Smarty, and now Gungfer was ready to face the same fate. As the rest of my colony was in a safe distance from getting blown to bits, it was up to Gungfer to sacrifice himself to the hunter drone. But Gungfer used his dementia powers to simply forget that explosions could kill him, and instead, he only suffered a mere flesh wound in his left leg. I tried to tell him he did a great job, but well, yeah, he couldn't hear me. We continued to safely breach several rooms like this. By using our elderly as bullet sponges, we had the upper hand in most of these battles. We even found a survey scanner, which Smarty hacked and used to locate an asteroid ready for mining with uranium ore. But we'd save that for later. After breaching several other rooms, we made our way to the most important room, the grav ship engine room. This room was very heavily guarded. It had 3 turrets that lined the corners of the room, with only one way to enter, and a trap of mechanical wasps ready to lunge at the first person who opened the door. And of course, that person was Gungfer. Once he opened the door, all hell broke loose. Every turret shot at him, and soon the wasps started barreling straight towards him. Thankfully, Time is a great shooter and was able to snipe down the wasps with an LMG while the others got rid of the turret in the furthest corner. To deal with the last 2 turrets, I had Coyote and Hugh tear down their walls using the melee weapons, while the other soldiers shot the other wall with their weapons until it broke open. This allowed the one firing squad to shoot down the second turret while behind cover. In the third turret, Gungfer decided to go head first against. Once that was taken care of, the room was secure, and the grav ship engine was now ours. As we obtained the grav core and began heading back to our base to heal up our troops, a raid was sent to attack us. I thought to myself, this is it, it's over. 4 heavily armed soldiers hopped up on steroids, while all my soldiers are still recovering from their wounds, is going to be the death of us. But as I inspected closer, I realized that not a single one of their troops had weapons that could damage us. Someone had a smoke grenade and the other 3 had EMP grenades, but no one on the team actually had a weapon that did damage. Then, as I thought that I couldn't have got luckier, they decided to raid the rest of the fort that I was invading. Essentially, they made clearing the rest of the fort like taking candy from a baby. They dropped smoke down so the turrets couldn't see anyone, and then EMP'd any remaining robots. So in the midst of this, I sent in Coyote and Hugh to bludgeon them to death. And once they were through, true, not only was the booty of the base now ours, but the booty of the soldiers was mine for the taking. Now that we have a new grav ship engine to create a bigger and even better ship, we can increase the size of our space pirate army and work towards our true goal, annihilating the mechanoids who are constantly being sent after us and hindering my kleptomantic quests to loot all the booty in the world. But in order to do that, I would need to turn my elderly space pirates into bioengineered super soldiers. But that would be for another day of becoming an intergalactic space pirate. If you want to see more elderly men thrown in the face of danger, make sure to like the video for part 2 of this series. I've really been enjoying this game, and I'd love to do more Rimworld content in the future. I love you guys, and I'll see ya. Thanks for watching.